because I'm not going to make the same mistake I made last time, and we're going to record this thing. Very good. All right. Yeah. For those of y'all that joined last time, we got some people coming a second time, Will. I was in a big hurry and I forgot to record it. This time I haven't. So Will, I'm going to do a very quick introduction again, and we're going to get rolling. Those of y'all joining us, this is Josh Null. I'm with Gulf Coast Financial Advisors located in Fairhope, Alabama. I'm joined by Will Steih. He is the Managing Director for Prime Capital Investment Advisors Tennessee office based in Nashville. He is also a CPA by trade. We're going to be diving into the SBA loan options, a little bit of the CARES Act, the payroll protection program, and everything else that's related to that. So if you're a business owner, entrepreneur, sole proprietor, 1099, self-employed contractor, anybody that kind of falls in that umbrella, and it's a big umbrella, I think you need to pay attention here because I still think there is a lot of confusion out there. One note, Will, before I kick it to you is Will and I are not bankers. So we are not doing this video in an attempt to collect loan applications or anything like that. What we are financial advisors, but Will and I both have a very similar mindset in that we are business advisors. And right now our business clients and our potential business clients need help navigating this probably as much as anything else they have going on. So that's why we're here today. So Will, I'm going to say hi to you again. How are you doing now that we're recording?
Yes. Good morning, Josh. Appreciate the opportunity to be on the call with you on this opportunity to share some news. These are challenging times, and putting quality information into people is paramount to helping them make their way through what is, there's an unprecedented use of the word unprecedented that's happened, and
right.
Helping the business owner navigate through this, get to the other side. That's what we're all about. And yeah, you're right. It's not about taking a loan application. There's no origination fee coming our direction. It is just pointing people to the source. And quite frankly, this is a very fluid situation. And I just reiterate the idea that this is a dynamic environment. What we talk about on Friday has evolved, and here we are on a Tuesday. We talk a little bit about what's happened and transpired since then. So we just want to encourage any business owner, take advantage of this opportunity and a combination of opportunities, really.
All right. So Will, first thing very quickly, what I want to do is, the CARES Act is the $2.2 trillion behemoth that is kind of the mothership of all of the SBA loans that are included in this, the disaster loans, the PPP and all that. So what I want to do first is I don't want to sit here and talk about, trying to decipher the entire CARES Act. There's too many pieces to that. What we want to dial in is there was $350 billion of that CARES Act allocated to small business owners and workers called the Paycheck Protection Program, pardon me. And there was also a certain number of billion, I think it was 10 billion. It's amazing how small that number seems next to 350 billion. But there was a certain number dedicated to the, and I don't have it in front of me, but the EIDL, right? And sorry, I'm trying to read three things at once. Let's walk through a couple different things there, because I think you and I did a webinar on Thursday on the PPP. We had a ton of participation. The next day, a bunch of people went on to apply, and more often than not, the banks were not quite ready, right? And I think then the banks got ready, and now the SBA system on the back end is completely overloaded. So I know that everybody's trying to navigate this thing. Let's walk through the different pieces that specifically apply to the SBA out of the CARES Act.
Gotcha. So Josh, that document that we have found to be a pretty valuable so far. I've reviewed literally dozens of these. I've sat in on webinars like this that quite frankly get really granular with attorneys and CPAs, right. And even had an occasion to hear from one of the drafters of the bill itself. So what this document is U.S. Chambers. Josh is scrolling through the U.S. Chamber of Commerce's what do you need to know? And we'll just take it from the top right there, Josh, hold up there on, and who's eligible for this. So what's considered to be a small business that's fewer than 500 employees. We've already heard that statement. 501c3s qualify as well. So it's not just those that are in for-profit. As you can imagine, many not-for-profits are taking it on the chin from what might be customary donations they're receiving for charitable contributions this time of year. This is for them as well. So that's who's eligible, fairly straightforward. What are the lenders looking for? Probably, if you don't already, most people have a banking relationship where you're keeping your operating account. Not every bank is going to be able to service this, but certainly the national banks, large regionals, those are equipped to handle and deal with it. So I'd first of all get in touch with your local bank or the person, your personal point of contact. If you haven't already, find out from them what if they in fact are going to serve as an originator to these loans. And then scroll down just a little bit there, Josh.
And Will, let me jump in on what you just said there. Most of the lenders, so two things. One, question to you, does someone have to have a relationship with a bank or at least some type of an account at a bank to begin this process? My understanding of it is yes.
Actually, I was just about to say no, Josh.
Well, but I mean, they have to they want to have some kind of relationship at that bank. Fair or no?
It's going to be helpful to you. It's certainly going to be something that you're going to want to, it's going to make it, the person's going to be a whole lot more willing to grease the skids for you and make sure you get through the system in short order if you have an existing relationship. But in some cases, they'll have an existing relationship, but that bank may not be able to handle it. They're not in a position to service or handle the request. So banks can't refuse you if you show up and say, hey, I want to apply for the payroll protection program. They can't refuse you because you're not an existing customer.
Okay.
Because ultimately here in that point to the U.S. Chamber on this document there, if you scroll down just a little bit, it's essentially the lender they're going to be taking a good faith certification that, yes, due to economic circumstances, due to COVID-19, these things, I am being impacted, I'm being affected, I need help. That's the extent of this. This is not your typical underwriting process that's going to take weeks and months to come to a conclusion. This is moving quickly. So, and there's no collateral required. This is a non-recourse loan, so you don't have to make a personal guarantee and potentially have personal assets subject to a creditor, in this case, the federal government, that are going to be accessed should you fail to repay whatever portion is that'll be due.
Okay. All right, Will, let's go through. So since we're already in the PPP, let's talk about what is the Paycheck Protection Program specifically. Then I'm going to circle back around to the other options with the SBA.
So there's really two thoughts here. One would be is how much can I borrow? What is that? What that looks like is it's 2.5 times a borrower's average monthly payroll cost, not to go above $10 million. Use a quick example. If and on the payroll side, the most compensation that we can consider for this formula is $100,000. If I take $100,000 divided by 12, it's $83.33 a month. That times 2.5 puts me at $20,833. If I true that up for some of the payroll taxes I have for self-employment or other payroll taxes, gets me around ballpark, let's say $25,000. So my loan limit can be up to 25 grand. I then in turn make application. They grant me the loan. I get an origination. Let's say this thing happens as quick as we'd like. It's April 15th. From April 15th forward for an 8-week period, I can use that $25,000 to cover payroll. But in addition, it's not just payroll, but in addition to payroll, I can cover any health insurance premiums I was making on behalf of employees, any retirement benefits I was paying on behalf of employees. I can even include rent on the property that we use to operate the business, utilities, general overhead, let's say, into that category. So the payroll cost is what determines my ability to, or my loan amount. And then on the backside, there's an 8-week period. And here's the good news. In that 8-week period, if I can exhaust that $25,000 loan, I'm going to have forgiveness on that loan. I will not have to repay that $25,000. That'll go away. If I use up 20 grand of it, well, then I only need to repay 5,000. And on the $5,000, it's a really agreeable 1% interest rate, a 2-year amortization. And on the front end, the first 6 months of interest is deferred. So very friendly, extremely friendly terms on those loans. And getting that information and getting the application started and having the opportunity for forgiveness is why I think it's a no-brainer to try to gather up one of these.
Well, all right. So I'm going to, before we move on from the PPP right now, we did get a comment here locally. There's been a couple of people call our local banks, and they've been told pretty consistently that they have to have an existing account with them to apply. Now, Will, you can add your opinion on this, but I'm going to take a guess that's probably the individual bank's stance right now.
Correct. Correct. I've yet to read or see anything that said the taxpayer is precluded from now, obviously they have all your personal information. They got your name, your social security number, your date of birth. I mean, it fast tracks the situation,
Right.
but there's nothing in the legislation that says the bank. So I might push back on that a little bit and say, hey, listen, if I need to get in touch with my congressman, fine. I mean, if you had to go that route, that might not be. I could go hardball pretty quick, but I could envision a bank trying to assert that just to kind of give themselves a little bit more protection.
I've got a pretty strong relationship with a local banker that does a lot of educational stuff. So I'm trying to get him on. So we will circle back around to that question. All right, then Will. So that is the payroll or the paycheck protection program.
Two thoughts there, Josh, too. So the live date went April 3rd, opened up a window on this past Friday for all employers with currently holding W-2 employees have payroll tax returns. Payroll tax returns can be really helpful there as far as obviously documenting for future reference where you came up with your 2.5 times your possible loan amount. But don't sit on the sidelines here. Friday, April 10th is when the window is going to open up for sole proprietors, independent contractors, and self-employed individuals. So that's where the opportunity is going to come up for those who don't have rank and file employees, but are eligible based on the PPP for loan assistance. Everything else applies exactly the same.
Let's repeat that. That is so important what you just said, because there absolutely has been people gone in to apply for the PPP through their bank's online application, and it's asking for them for documentation that they would not have because they're a 1099 sole proprietor. So if you don't mind, walk through that one more time, because that's a question I get as much as anything.
There are two camps that are going to have the ability to access these dollars. Employers with 500 or fewer employees, up to 35 million in revenue, and independent contractors, self-employed individuals, and sole proprietors. So it could be a real estate agent that's out there that's a 1099 relationship that doesn't actually have an employee. Maybe they source out some marketing function and they pay through 1099s, and that person needs to be ready and prepared. So, and quite frankly, you could do it at 12:01 a.m. Friday morning. That hit me the other night. But once you get to Friday, April 10th, it's Friday, April 10th at 12:01 a.m. The systems weren't in place this past Friday on the 3rd. Bank of America was the first large bank to get an online system in place, but even it had some trials and tribulations they had to work through. But for, again, sole proprietors, independent contractors, self-employed persons, be in position to this Friday to make your request for PPP. Okay.
Now, Will, I'm going to pivot just a little bit. So the payroll protection program is, whether you're 1099 or you've got W-2 employees, there's going to be some paperwork required to apply for that. You're going to have to input some tax information into that. They're fairly liberal with it, but there are certain boxes that you have to check on that per the application. And that's not just the bank, that's the SBA's the application, which you can pull up online. So pivot to the other option that came out first, because I think some people are getting this mixed up, Will. The Economic Injury Disaster Loan, otherwise known as the EIDL. Can we talk a little bit?
Right. So the EIDL, and actually, Josh, the Chamber also has another document. It's just a one-page document. If you wanted to, off screen there, toggle over to the Chamber's website and see it's a one-pager that they had for EIDL.
I'll find it. You keep talking.
One of the options that you have as a small business owner is to use this other act that was put into play and incorporated. The primary difference would be it has a $10,000 grant that essentially, as people probably remember from their college days, grants are things that are granted to you. It's not a loan. There's no intention of it being repaid or paid back. The amount, it's up to $10,000 in the EIDL. There you go, Josh. Thank you for that. The EIDL, Economic Injury Disaster Loan, is applied for directly with the SBA. So you go out to the SBA website and begin to make a request there. Again, eligibility extends to the same group as applies to the PPP, independent contractors, private nonprofits, sole proprietors, and those companies with fewer than 500 employees. It does have a loan provision within it. So there's this emergency $10,000 grant that basically says, hey, you were in business as recently as December 31st, 2019. You are in a position to be able to raise your hand and say, hey, I need help right now. You can make that application through the SBA. It does involve a loan component. The loan parameters are different. We're talking the difference between a 2-year amortization and the PPP. The EIDL, it's kind of been referred to as the EIDL loan, comes in the form of a 30-year amortization. Interest rates higher. It's not 1%. It's actually 3.75. So the interest rate's a little heftier, but on a 30-year amortization, if you're borrowing a couple $100,000, it's not going to. It's ideal compared to what other options we have available to us. Two separate things. And I'd encourage every business owner to do it. Go through the EIDL process, apply for the emergency grant of $10,000. It does segue and have, and there's a note down there to the lower right there, it does segue and have an impact on, you can't take 2 loans out. So they're going to, either you pick the PPP to take your loan or you go with the EIDL. The grant is something separate. If you do receive the grant, it potentially would eat into and erode some of that forgiveness provision of the, from a dollar reduction of the forgiveness provision in payroll protection program. So again, another outlet, another opportunity. I don't envision or foresee there being a downside to make an application for both, and just being prepared to, now the question is going to be is how quick, because you're going to the SBA website, separate from going to the bank, a local bank, and working through those folks who then in turn get in touch with the SBA. Again, very fluid situation. Things are moving quickly. I can envision where it can feel a little bit like a black hole where you throw things into the SBA and now you're sitting back waiting to see an email. They'll give you a confirmation number. I actually worked through this with a client to help them out. They'll give you a confirmation number on the request for the EIDL. That's something that I got to serve as a reference point to return to later to make inquiry about the status. But there's your EIDL opportunity.
Right. And Will, a couple things to say here. And also too, a lot of times when people are looking, Googling SBA disaster loans, they're seeing the Paycheck Protection Program, they're seeing the EIDL, the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, but they're also seeing SBA Express Bridge Loans and SBA Debt Relief. I want to just make a very quick point on that. The SBA Debt Relief is on an existing SBA loan. What they're saying, I'm not going to get in the weeds on exactly how it all works, but what they're saying is they'll give you some relief on your interest on an existing SBA loan if you have one already in place. 2, the SBA Express Bridge Loan is a little bit higher amount than the EIDL. I believe it's 25 grand, but again, you need to have an pre-existing relationship with an SBA Express lender. So the point of that is a significant amount of people right now, the easiest thing to apply for right now, literally, well, it takes 5-10 minutes, is the EIDL. Get that knocked out.
Absolutely.
Hopefully we lost you, Will. Hopefully your banker already has the online application if you qualify for the first week of the people with the W-2 employees and all that. And then starting Friday morning, as Will was saying, it'll open up for the second part of the PPP for, us 1099 people, us self-employed contractors and sole proprietors and all that. So the whole nother wave is about to hit. Will, I do want to say this because I don't think anybody knows this exact answer yet. There is a defined pool of money, right? There has been the perception given that you got to jump in on that because when that money's gone, it's gone. And maybe that is true. And I want to make sure I'm very careful with what I say here. But my opinion is that, and I can have an opinion as a financial advisor, is that they're going to find a way, depending on how long this coronavirus situation continues, they're going to find a way to help people. So they're being as flexible as you're ever going to see a government entity be right now, right? So don't be, just take it one thing at a time as you're walking through this thing. One of our questions was, do we recommend going and applying for this stuff? No, we don't recommend one way or the other. That's a decision you all have to make on your own. What we're trying to give you is this is how you actually do it, and this is what you're signing up for. Is that something that you need in your situation? So All right.
Josh, let me make comment to that end, and maybe we're going to time here. We can take some questions from folks. I'm encouraging every business owner. There's no provision here that says you have to be unprofitable to step up to the plate to receive this. I've been on the phone with a couple companies that are doing extremely well right now. They too are, it may seem unfair, but they too are eligible for payroll protection program. So I'm encouraging every one of my clients to pursue this. I will make a recommendation if I go out that far. I can't envision a scenario where you shouldn't at least make application. I'm going to echo some sentiments there. Yes, the $350 billion seems hard to believe it's a finite amount with 30 million small businesses across the country, but it will exhaust itself. I was on the phone with a heavy hitting real estate guy here in Nashville before the call, and he was on a call with a regional bank giving a report, and they'd already had $1 billion worth of $1 billion with a B dollars worth of requests, which exceeded their loan originations in all of 2019. So people are stepping up to the plate. People are asking for help. Makes sense to me, and I just encourage anybody to pursue that. Now, what exactly are you going to get to $10,000 grant? Are you going to get exactly 2.5 times what it is your loan capacity is? Maybe not, but at least ask for as much as you can vouch for, and put yourself in a situation. And here's my line I have for you is, and it's not original to me, it's not an original thought, but there's an Admiral Bill McCravens that said it. There's the only thing more contagious than a virus is hope, and I really feel like there is hope. And the hope comes in the form of any number of things, but having some lifeblood in the form of some capital to sustain your business, to keep employees who you otherwise might have to show the door to, that's something to rally around. And I do believe with the speed with which this is happening, I think this is a far different sequence of events than what we experienced back in 2008, 2009. That same real estate guy I was on the phone with earlier, they felt this large regional bank, well known to the people of Middle Tennessee and even across the Southeast, felt like this situation would resolve based on how fast they saw the federal government responding to. So that's my hope. My hope is that the actions we're taking are going to help everybody, small business owners.
All right, so Will, here's what I want to do now for the next 10 minutes. I know some of y'all are joining us on your phone, and it's hard to just sit there and type out a paragraph question. So if you have a question you would like to ask, raise your hand, and we'll allow you all to talk. If you can type it, feel free to put it in the Q&A. I think we've addressed those questions so far. So if anybody has any questions right now on this, let me know. I've got a couple for Will while you all are thinking about what you have. Will, do we know on the PPP, we've got a forgivable amount if it's used in a timely fashion on payroll? Do we know the interaction of the employee retention tax credit? Boy, that's getting in the weeds. Man, that's a heck of a question. Golly. Interaction of the employee retention tax credit and the payroll tax deferral. Man, can you tackle that, Will? That's beyond my.
Without getting in the weeds, there will be a relationship between the employer who's got employees and they're paying payroll taxes and they're withholding from paychecks and they're submitting both income taxes as well as payroll, FICA taxes, Social Security, and unemployment taxes. So if we have employers listening in that are in that functioning capacity, as I do several clients, there's going to be interplay between how much loan forgiveness you're able to be granted, and then in turn, how far off, there's a 3-year window, how far off you're able to defer the payment of the employer's side of Social Security tax or FICA and unemployment tax. So there's interplay there, and I certainly encourage anybody get together if you don't have a qualified CPA that can handle that. I know Josh has some people that are close to him that do this work extremely well. Ask Josh for a referral there in your local area. But that's everybody's situation is going to be fact dependent, and I don't want to go too far into that. But there's interplay there where you won't be able to take as much credit if you took more forgiveness, vice versa. So I think I'd rather have the forgiveness above the tax credit. But for the extent that you don't get forgiveness, there may still be something left for you, if you will, in the bucket to draw on in the form of the tax credit. So important to keep that in mind.
Well, on that note, Will, I got a question from Ashley. She was a great participant on our last webinar. What if your employees don't want to come back to work? It's a fair question.
Fair question. Very good question. That's a challenge. I mean, that's it's a possibility. I'm really curious to know, what are they doing instead? I had one employer here with about 50 employees that was a little frustrated by the granting of some unemployment leeway, where if you added it all up, it looked as though maybe the person could make more money staying at home.
Right.
The 90% threshold, I guess if you had 10% attrition, so long as you had 90% of the same staffing as you had prior to February 15th, and then through the end, you had till June 30th to put that back together. This is an interesting question, because a thought popped in my mind that said, okay, if it's not the same exact person, what if it's the same level of retention, which opens up a whole other thing I don't want to comment about. But yeah, Ashley, great question. And I would say that, again, that's going to impact our ability for the forgiveness piece. But it's kind of one of those things that I would just deal with it when it happens, deal with it when it comes, keep pressing forward. I'd rather have the cash.
You're right.
Per se, not need it than need it and not have it, for sure.
All right, Will, here, put your CPA hat on tight. Can we use the PPP for rent and utilities more than 25% of the total loan amount, as long as people are rehired by June 30th? I feel like I'm taking the ACT again.
Yeah, Josh, if you want to toggle back to that other chamber document,
okay.
The thought process there is that, yeah, we figure out what your eligibility and the amount of the loan that you're able to bring in. You stay right on that page, Josh. And then if you look at that from the standpoint of how might the forgiveness be reduced, you'll see right there the amount of loan forgiveness calculated is dependent upon if you have the number of employees relative to that, and if you have a change in the wages. All right, so I have the same number. I say I had 10 employees, I keep them all, but I'm going to cut them by 50%. Well, on a hard number head count, I've got the same 10, but I've dramatically reduced how much I'm paying them. And if it's greater than 25%, that will impact the ability for the loan, what portion of the loan is going to be forgiven there. So there's interplay there. But it'd be kind of hard. I guess I'd be hard pressed to envision if I've used the loan amount, if I've used my payroll to come up with my loan amount, if I'm going to have anything, what I have left over, or what if I utilize more of it for rent and utilities and interest for anything that I had prior to February 15th.
Go ahead. I'm sorry, Will.
No, I'm just finishing that thought. That's.
I mean, to me, this is going to sound really self-serving, but this is when it's really handy to have your team of your CPA, your financial advisor, and your attorney. You got 3 nerds on your side helping you navigate how all these pieces playing together, because the reality of it is it is a math equation where A does impact C depending on what B is, right?
Absolutely, 100%.
All right. Ray asks, if I have 1099 employees, can I as the business owner apply for the PPP for me and the employees, or do the 1099 employees need to apply themselves? That's a great question, because some news just came out. Hopefully you already have it, Will, because I saw it this morning and didn't type it out.
No, go ahead and make comment, Josh. I'm gonna gather my thoughts on that.
Well, I think what they just released was because of the what's coming Friday is they're allowing / encouraging 1099 folks to apply on their own versus the business owner trying to do that. Because I'm going to dump it back in your lap, hot potato, Will, but if a business owner is trying to apply for a 1099 employee, he's not going to have the same type of payroll documentation and tax filing that he could submit that they're asking for that he would have on his normal 1099 or on his W-2 people.
No, those are my thoughts, Josh. So I say I have, I'm in some sort of an operation where whether it's the business circumstances or tradition, whatever it is, I'm paying people out by 1099s. Maybe I'm the real estate brokerage house that has real estate brokers working for me, and they receive 1099 compensation, and I've got a small clerical staff of W-2 people. I'm limited to that small clerical staff of W-2 people, plus whatever my own compensation is, up to $100,000. So that's the extent of what the business owner who almost entirely utilizes 1099 help. That's the extent of my ability to get to the loan. I can't take into account for anybody paid by 10. This is W-2 only. And then on the flip side, again, same analogy, real estate brokerage house, those real estate brokers who receive a 1099 from that house, they in turn go and individually make application for their PPP.
Right.
That's what I'd envision there. Yeah, we want to keep those things separate and unique from each other.
Well, I'll speak from your and I's perspective to a certain degree. We receive, at least I do. Let me talk for me. I receive 1099s from all over God's green earth. I couldn't even imagine expecting any of those companies sending me the 1099 to go in and apply correctly for me, right? So I see the business owner wanting to do the right thing, but when you accept employment as a 1099 subcontractor, you are by definition an independent contractor, responsible for your own taxes, responsible for your own filings. And to me, this would lend to the only one that's going to have a clear picture of your 1099 income should be you, because if you're a 1099 employee, there's at least a decent chance that you have 1099s coming from more than one employer. You're subcontracting your work out to a variety of employment situations. So that's my opinion on that. You're going to chuckle at this one, but anonymous attendee says, I use Wells Fargo, and they sent me a letter stating that Wells Fargo ran out of their allocated money for the PPP. How do I find out which banks are still lending? Can't say I saw that question coming, Will. But do you have an opinion on that?
I too saw that Wells Fargo basically threw their hands up in the air. Again, they're now trying to massage the PR pushback, but they just weren't willing to play ball. And again, it's tough. If you could pivot, I mean, you're going to have to pivot. So pivot. Is there a resource that I've not found a resource that keeps a running tab on, who's still in the game? JP Morgan Chase, Bank of America was the first to get the online thing at least out there, and then Citigroup. So any of those large regionals, large nationals. But again, here's where having some relationship with a local bank, or maybe ask around, find somebody else. Maybe Josh, you mentioned a local banker there.
I do.
Catch a referral to somebody else that might be able to help.
Okay. This one, I'll take this one offline. Just James is asking, is there in Fairhope area, is there someone that has success in this process that can come to my office and help enter this information? I'd say it's probably unlikely you'll have anybody be willing to travel like that right now, for better or worse. It's just kind of situation we're in. However, to me, this is a prime opportunity to find out which banker and which CPA and potentially which financial advisor has got their arms around this kind of thing and assemble that team. So that sounds self-serving. Doesn't even have to be me. Doesn't have to be Will. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, I guarantee you that there are some people out there right now. There's leaders in the banking industry. There's leaders in the CPA industry. Hopefully you all consider Will and I leaders in the financial advice industry that are getting out on the front lines of this, because the reality of it is, Will, even since we had our webinar Thursday, some of this stuff has changed. It's not like this is a very fluid situation. So it's not something where you can just set it and forget it and go on down your way. I think you need somebody that's in this up to their elbows, wading through this muck and trying to help you out. All right, question to you, Will. Most of my employees are tipped at a restaurant, restaurant workers that are tipped. If I bring them back before we are able to officially reopen, what happens if I pay them what they usually make and I end up in a deeper hole? They obviously don't want to work at the server rate or even minimum wage. Do they account for what payroll I have reported? So, Will, on our last webinar, wasn't part of the stipulation of the PPP that hospitality and restaurant employees had to be hired back? Or if they were hired back, they had to come back at minimum wage. Is that correct?
Yeah, that was part of that. What we saw in that previous, some documents related to that.
So let's do again, I feel like I'm taking my ACT again here. Tipped workers. So she's saying, what happens if I bring them back before I officially reopen? So it's an anonymous attendee. So I'm assuming that they decided to not stay open as a restaurant for carry out or for delivery. Maybe more likely than not did not fit their business model and wasn't worth the losses that they were going to incur trying to just keep the doors open. So and I'm saying she or he, it's an anonymous attendee, they apply for the PPP, and they bring these workers back in, but the workers don't have anything to do. Interesting.
Yeah, really what it ties into, Josh, is, you know, going back to, we're talking about the forgiveness provision, is the origination date of the loan. And if you're working with your banker and you're working with the bank, I don't know, again, this is something we haven't even really seen it yet. I know people have started the process. Everything is ensuing since then, but I've yet to see anybody fully have it culminate in, yep, dollars have funded. I'm sitting on whatever, $25,000 bucks, getting ready to start writing checks. It's a fluid situation. I would strongly encourage them, if you somehow could influence the origination date of the loan, because that's the point at which the clock starts on the 8 weeks. If you can say, hey, listen, I've locked it up, I've got confirmation what my loan amount is, quite frankly, I would have a hard time resisting the urge to put the cash in the account. But if I could position the origination date somehow, and then business, again, this is where business owners are going to have to get savvy and start structuring things and maybe thinking outside the box.
Right.
How can I say, hey, let's make it May 1st. That way May and June are going to come around. I'm going to be prepared. I'm going to hustle, beat a drum, try to collect all the people that have since departed between now and May 1st, and then open the doors come May 1st. I mean, that's going to take some, quite frankly, it's a nuanced conversation, but it is trying to position yourself. I understand the question. You're trying to position yourself to get things rolling so that revenue's coming in the door to offset the expenses that you're paying. But this is going to be one of those things. Maybe it's a 2-week lead in. Maybe you do it and get people together and start paying them 2 weeks ahead of the launch, May 1st launch date. But that's just something that business owners are going to have to think through and strategize around.
Well, Will, one more question that's right teed up for that, and it's from a local business owner, pretty respected guy named Brad. If the forgiveness period is 8 weeks and employees are on a twice per month pay period, so that means there's only 3 payroll periods in a total of 8 weeks. Is forgiveness on actual payroll run or pay for services during the 8 weeks, which may actually be paid after the 8-week period? So what he's saying is basically how their payroll structure is set up. And I know you've got a little bit of background on that from your CPA days, but how their structure is set up is they're going to be trying to collect 8 weeks of PPP assistance when the actual dollars going out the door in payroll may not be for 9 or 10 weeks. That's a great question too. Man, my goodness.
Yeah, it's an absolute terrific question. I got like an accounting background by experience there. Great question. Don't have a hard and fast answer to that. And given that we are operating in a realm where there's even this idea of a good faith certification, if I'm the employer, and that's the way it worked out, is I would probably point to the idea of expense accrued. And if I haven't paid out that last 4th pay period, that's going to incorporate the final 2 weeks of the 8. I've got 6 weeks in the books, but I haven't quite had the pay date hit yet. Again, if we say we're a cash basis taxpayer, you could be real conservative and say, no, you actually have to part ways with the cash, get constructive receipt by your employee in order to be able to validate it. I'm going to say, again, opinion, we're going to see some grace here. It says, hey, listen, I accrued it for that last 2-week period, but hadn't yet paid it. I can prove it. There it is. That's my hope would be, is that the employer would be able to have we'd have some grace there extended to be able to incorporate that final 2 weeks.
Very good. Well, I'm going to ask you 2 more questions, and then we're going to shut this down so we don't go too long. And then I'll let everybody know where they can find it again, because I recorded it this time. We have somebody that says, and here, this is not a question, Will, this is my opinion. Or well, actually it is a question. I'm finding that many people are refusing to work. If I offer them what happens when I offer them full-time employment to come back and they refuse? I've actually got workers telling me not to call them anymore because they want to stay on unemployment. So my question to you is, Will, to qualify for the PPP, does the business owner have to prove that they hired the same person back, or that they hired the same number back?
Josh, that's that. Earlier, we just had that. I incorporated that thought, or attempted to convey it, and stopped short because I found myself starting to riff into an area that has not been documented yet. And my line of thinking is, if I'm a business owner and I had 10 employees and I was hoping to get at least 9 of them back, but I've got 3 that are holding out on me that otherwise I've got 7, but I hadn't get the last 2 out of 3. And those 3 are refusing because they've got a better deal thanks to the federal government sending them a check for $600 a week, plus whatever the state. In Tennessee, it's $275, so they'd be at $875 per week. Not even sure all that would even be subject to income tax. that may be a better deal for them. I would definitely want to document that, and I might go about the process. Now, again, this isn't hard and fast. I haven't seen documentation on this. There's no guarantee. But if I went ahead and hired 2 other people that were willing to work,
Right.
and I got 9 heads in the door,
Right.
I'm going to point to the 9 heads and say, hey, listen, I made every best effort. I called this guy 3 times. They refused, he or she said they weren't going to come back. I documented it. And man, I needed the help. I wanted to make sure I followed the rules based on what you guys had stated about having at least 90%. So I hired the 2 people to add to the 7 to get me back to my 9 out of 10 to qualify. That's, again, this is so new that we haven't even gotten to that point yet. But that would be, that quite frankly, if you have gotten the origination, you borrow the money, it gives you a puncher's chance of succeeding in attaining or receiving some forgiveness. Worst case is that you brought some folks on, you used money that was part of the loan program. Hopefully you're going to have them be productive. Hopefully they're in operation where they can get to it and start creating some revenue for you. But that's how I would approach that particular subject.
That's the kind of people you want right now anyway, as people wanting to go to work. I mean, Jen and I very quickly were talking this morning, thinking about all of the nurses and doctors right now that could be literally going in and just pretending to be slightly sick to get out of work. And instead they're hitting this thing full on, knowing that they're getting exposed to it. I mean, that's real bravery, man. So if you don't,
those are heroes for sure.
I mean, if you have somebody that's not willing to go, push a shovel around, I don't know what to tell you. You and I were never wired that way. So maybe it's trying to find somebody else. I mean, crisis tends to reveal people's true nature. So I hate to sound callous, but that's how I feel about it. Last question, Will, because it's a good one. Jessica asks, single member LLC here, payroll doesn't currently meet 75% of my expenses. We totally understand what you're saying. What program is best for me to apply for? Well,
in sequence, what we talked about, go EIDL first, try to see how much of that $10,000 grant you might be able to catch. Pivot, go to payroll protection program, make application there, and try to attempt to come up with, again, the payroll costs are what drive that upper limit of the loan. And then I would rely on the PPP. So the PPP comes first in my mind where it concerns straight up loan. The EIDL would be another option as well. But you're just going to have to, if whatever your payroll costs are, we can't, it is what it is as far as that goes.
Yep. Very good. Will, I'm going to go ahead and start wrapping this up because we went a little long. I do want everybody to know that we are going to be doing this again. Will, I think our next one is what's really tailored towards the 1099 world, the self-employed contractors, the sole proprietors. And
right.
If we can, because that come Friday, there's going to be all kinds of, because we don't even know what the actual requirements are going to be on the different bank applications. So I'm sorry we didn't get to all y'all's questions. They were great, but we will be back. To find this webinar, I'm going to download it. I got to run it through compliance, and then we will have it saved on my website, gulfcoastfa.com. That's Gulf Coast FA. FA is in financialadvisor.com. You'll see it under the COVID-19 resources. Also, we will also post this on our YouTube channel, so you can actually see the video there. The video, just look for Josh Null, Gulf Coast Financial Advisors. It'll be plenty of places if you all want to recircle around to it. And I'll try to get where maybe I can compress it and email it to everybody in case you want to share it. So, Will, let me say the disclaimer, and then I want to thank you and allow you to close. Will and I are financial advisors. Advisory services offered through Prime Capital Investment Advisors, PCIA, a federally registered investment advisor. The following are commentaries and responses are the opinions of myself, Josh Null, and Will Steih, and are not necessarily the opinions of PCIA. They are for informational and educational purposes only. They are not and should not be considered investment advice. Past performance is no guarantee of future results, no guarantees expressed or implied. While Will is a CPA by training, y'all please understand that neither Will or I are bankers. We are financial advisors. We are doing this because we view our clients, our business clients, as we are their business advisor as well. And that's why we're putting this information out. You all know where to find me. I'm here in downtown Fairhope. Mr. Will is in Nashville, Tennessee, but he partners with me on a lot of stuff. If you like the combo that you have going here, obviously there's a lot more going on than just the SBA loans and the crisis. There's still business to be handled. We would love to give you a hand. Will, I'm going to turn to you to finish this off.
Terrific. Again, it's a dynamic situation. It's fluid. I just had a post here, actually from the Washington Post, that the Treasury is preparing to seek more than an additional $200 billion to replenish this small business coronavirus program. So to Josh's earlier point, this is how things changed in the 40 plus minutes we've been working through this webinar, is more dollars are coming. So I want to encourage everybody to make use of that, apply, see where the chips fall, and move forward, and catch yourself an opportunity to hold fast, to keep things moving along, and give yourself some breathing room, get to the other side of it. And again, necessity is the mother of invention. I'm seeing all kinds of interesting ways that people are working through this situation and through the crisis. And I want to encourage everybody, business owners, Josh and I, Gulf Coast Financial Advisors, Prime Capital, we are here to serve. We're here to help you out. And we get to the other side of it. Maybe, who knows, by 4th of July or Labor Day, we're having a different conversation. And hopefully we will be. So I really appreciate everybody in attendance. Thank you.
All right, y'all. Thank you. Have a great day. We'll put information out, and I'll email you all on when the next one's coming. We will go over some of the same stuff, but we're going to be very cognizant not to just rehash everything. We're going to have all this new information to go over. So thank you all. Really appreciate all the commentary, all the participants. It was great. Have a great day, and talk to you all soon.